Albert DeSalvo, one of the lesser known ones, talking about his real name. His nickname in the media was the Boston Strangler. And there's a film, again, about the Boston Strangler, which is excellent. I mean, the film may not be excellent, but Tony Curtis plays the Boston Strangler, Albert DeSalvo, and he's brilliant. I know he's probably made a lot of crap films, but he was absolutely amazing in that film. Really, jaw-dropping. Yeah, you probably find it on some streaming service or whatever. The Boston Strangler with Tony Curtis, absolutely brilliant. So, what's interesting about this? Well, Albert DeSalvo, he was born into a really strange family. His father was extremely abusive physically and sexually weird. He used to bring prostitutes into the house and do his business with this prostitute in front of the kids, in front of his own kids. Well, what's that about? So apparently that traumatised him, and his father was physically abusive, broke all his mother's fingers in front of him. So he definitely didn't have the best start to life, and he was just generally untrustworthy and a liar. But what he became was a rapist, and so he was known by different nicknames, and the first one was the measuring man. So his trick was to go to a woman's flat, right? Knock on the door. She opens the door, and he says, "Hi, my name's Johnson. I'm from a modelling agency. You're absolutely beautiful. I've been authorised to take your measurements, and I've been authorised to pay you $10 for that. If you want to do it in your underwear, I can pay you 15, and if you want to do it naked, I can pay you 25. And many women went for it. Many women said, "Yeah, come in and measure me." I wanted a career in modelling or whatever, but many women did. And he'd go in and measure them and got whatever, and then he got whatever he could get from the experience. That's what he was there for. But yeah, he was the measuring man, and he raped a lot of these women, and he was a hunted rapist. So he's a bad man. And then after that, I think it was the Green Man. They just called him the Green Man, because he used to go around in a green boiler suit, we call it, these all-in-one like repairman suits. Because that was his trick. He was a repairman, so he'd go in a building, he'd look at the names of the people who lived in the flats, and say, right, this is a woman's name, and then they'd let him up, and he'd go to the door and say, yeah, the landlord sent me to turn your water off because we've got a leak in the basement. Well, he didn't tell me about that. And he'd go in and they'd close the door, and then at some point he'd attack them and rape them. Did that multiple times. Meanwhile, you've got the Boston Strangling killings, and this again froze Boston. So this is why you look at it as a cult thing. You think, are these cults deliberately doing like some kind of attack against the city, like an anarchistic attack? We can paralyse a full city. I can see why they might want to do that if they were anarchistic Satanist cults, So the Boston Strangler, it started out, the first 5 crimes were old white women, and then suddenly he killed a young black woman, and then the rest were young white women. So the investigators at the time were convinced it was different people doing it, because you don't go from deliberately targeting old white women to a young black girl and then young white girls after that. So the investigating officers at the time were absolutely sure that it was more than one person involved, and the media were running this every day, headlines every day, front page every day, especially in Boston, the Boston Globe being the big paper, I think, in Massachusetts. But Albert DeSalvo steps forward one day and he says, "It was me, I'm the Boston Strangler." Right? Admits it. And he told his family during the whole process that he was going to be rich with book deals and movie deals, and he was going to buy the hospital because they wouldn't send him to prison because he was insane apparently. So they're going to send him to a hospital, but he'd have so much money that he could buy the hospital and then live in it. He wasn't uh, he wasn't right in the head, obviously. But he stepped forward and said, "I'm the Boston Strangler." Right, okay. And he got a lot of details right, but revising his testimony, people have found, investigators have found, that the media, as they always do, had printed a lot of bullshit about this, to keep the story going. They just printed stuff that's not true. And the exact bullshit that appeared in the papers was repeated by Albert DeSalvo in his confessions to the police. So, he got some information right, some that wasn't publicly released, but I mean, he could have found this out in prison. There were lots of ideas about where he got the information from. Maybe he even did a couple. But to suggest that he did them all is almost demonstrably false, because he got some really strong key details about the murders wrong. And he got them exactly verbatim as they appeared in the media, which he'd clearly just read it in the newspaper and told the police that that's what he'd done. So I don't think he was part of a cult, particularly. That's not the impression I get. I think there may have been a group of people doing it, just like they did, or I reckon they did, in New York and in LA. I think they did it in Boston as well. Maybe a different cult, maybe the same cult under a different name. Who knows? But I don't reckon it was this guy Albert DeSalvo. If you look at him, he's a pathetic character, really, and not the brightest either. And the MOs don't stack up for it to be one person. So